But for me, like as far as how do I make music, I feel like most of my music making happens in an imaginative state. That's my favorite part.
Ross Irwin is a great trumpet player, composer, singer-songwriter, traveller. The first question is, so why do you have music in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's two things, I guess, to answer why I have it now. It goes back to, I mean, it was part of our family. Like that's the boring part of the answer. It was mum's a classical soprano and my uncle's a like jazz and commercial trumpet player in Sydney, and he lives over in Brazil now. But yeah, there was always, elements of that. And when my mum remarried when I was still sort of, nine or so years old, yeah, she married into a family of people who all played instruments and all played piano and sang in choirs and things like that. And so I grew up with it sort of in the house. It was always just part of the course that you'd do something. And, playing in brass bands when I was little and stuff like that, playing cornet and starting that way. We so many brass players started. As far as then what turned into what I do now, and with the beginnings of that were in sort of when I was maybe about 12 or 13 in high school, that awkward time of becoming a teenager who doesn't play football.
In Victoria. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was a thing, but I mean, I didn't think about it this way at the time, but it's definitely now become a thing where it's, I think it gave me, that's what gave me identity. I went to a school where there was a good music program. There was opportunities to play in a big band and an orchestra. And I felt like I was quite young. Amongst the crippling anxiety and self-doubt about everything, there was also this thing that I kind of partially thought I'm okay at this, or I'm good at this, and I think that gave me a sense of identity. And then definitely when I started getting into jazz and big band, even more so, like that became my identity, as a young person. And I sort of carried that through into my adult years. And I've had to reevaluate it a couple of times and look at it to see if it's healthy, because I think I attached, like a lot of us do, attached a lot of self-worth to my music and my output as a musician and the way I play, which can be a really special thing, but also can be quite crippling as far as anytime I did a solo that I didn't think was my absolute best, which was most times, I feel kind of a bit shit about it, But then there's that thing of you still love playing it. It was never enough to stop me getting up back on the bandstand again, because I loved it so much. It's a weird dichotomy when you feel like you're a bit of a perfectionism. You attach a lot of self-worth to what you do. And so, I think that basically if I put it down to the beginnings and of where I am now, which started when I was about 13 and 14, getting into jazz and composing and arranging and stuff. Yeah, it was, I loved it, no doubt about that, but it was an identity thing. I love I love the romance of it all. And I don't mean romance in a kind of couple way, a relationship. I mean the romance of the genre, the romance of I love the old photos, and I loved, seeing old footage of these, it sort of had so much appeal to me. So maybe that was going to be there no matter what, but that's how it gave me a sense of identity, in a time in my life where I probably wouldn't have had much sort of confidence or identity otherwise.
Yeah. Do you think, you said you sort of started playing at a young age. I mean, if you started playing an instrument sort of a little bit later, which a lot of people do, I think in that awkward teenage years, you kind of need to have some sort of grasp of an instrument or to have that as your identity.
Yeah, for sure. I think also if you start before the self-consciousness of being, a burgeoning adult kicks in, I think that's a really good thing. And I think that's a really important one with jazz and improvising, is it teaching a 9-year-old improvising, or getting them willing to improvise and be excited about improvising is so much easier than with a 14-year-old.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. For two reasons. One, the 14-year-old has all the things of I don't want it to be bad. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to have this, and this. There's all that attached to it. But there's also their ear is more refined and they know that it sounds bad. As you get older, the musical ear is refined. Even if you're not necessarily training in music, you sort of become more aware. Whereas an 8-year-old, makes just honks away and doesn't really, and they might not, they know roughly the difference, but it's not the same thing. They'll happily honk away and wait for you to go, what do you think? Whereas a 14-year-old can play and go, it's bad. One, because of their own self-consciousness, but also two, because their ear is probably subtly developed enough that they can sort of go, oh, this sounds really wrong and bad. So I think that's a big one as well, like with jazz, but also just like you said, playing an instrument. It was already a big part of me, and I already did it to a certain level. So when I hit those awkward years of feeling all the things that you do feel as you sort of like, when you're that age, I already had something that I was good at. I wasn't trying to develop that skill and start that skill in that awkward time.
Yeah.
I do think that's a big part of it and a big factor.
Yeah. Well, I think getting kids playing instruments at that young age is only a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And getting them, I love, getting them improvising. Getting them willing to make sound that isn't a note on the page. And to sort of and to have some agency and some ownership over things they do on their instrument, I think is a great thing for them personally as well, separate of the music as well, as they then transition into that sort of, becoming a teenager and then leaving school after that. It's I think it's a really great flow-on effect.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll get to the second question is, so how do you make music?
Well, I feel like most of my music making, I'm sort of playing a little bit less these days, I guess. I still tour with the Cat Empire, of course, and the Bamboos. And then I have certain other projects that, I'll do, and certain other playing things. There's certain people in Melbourne that I will always say yes to if they ask me, I love to play with because they're sort of my people. But I've it was a bit of a, partially a conscious decision, but also because I was away on tour a lot. I don't work locally that much in Melbourne as much anymore. I'm not out 4 or 5 nights a week playing shows, playing gigs. And that happened, because I was away on tour a lot, so people got sick of me not being available. But then also, no, it was a conscious choice, and especially once I moved out to where I live now, a little bit out of town, it was more of a conscious choice that I was really going to be selective, because that had become not my relationship with music anymore. The trumpet is not my relationship with music.
Right.
That's not the connector. And I guess it's never always been the only one, because I got into arranging and composing quite young. But for me, as far as how do I make music, I feel like most of my music making happens in an imaginative state. That's right. My favorite part. That's my favorite part. My favorite part is the conceptual idea. Even before I know what the piece is going to have, I might hear something and go, I want to do something like that, spark an idea. I love the ideas. That's my favorite. My favorite thing is the idea.
If only you could just leave it there. Yeah,
no, seriously, I feel that way sometimes, because I'm not so good at then executing and following through. I'm pretty, I have my attention shifts, and I have a wide variety of things I'm into, which I think is a really positive thing for all of it. I'm a better singer-songwriter because I still listen to Ellington, and I'm a better big band writer because I listen to folk singers, and there's all that stuff that co-mingles in a really interesting way, which I love. But the negative side of it is that I'll be halfway through, I'll have an idea, and then the next day I'll hear some folk album. I'll be like, I'm going to make an album of Civil War songs, and then the next day it's and then sort of things. But I try and write everything down, and that, to tell you the truth, that's my favorite part of the process, is the conceptual part of it. Before I even, maybe then at the piano, I don't make a whole lot of music. I don't often demo things up, or, and when I'm composing or arranging, it's very rare that I use playback. And it's something whenever I've taught arranging students, I've said to them, other than checking for wrong notes and making sure you haven't forgotten accidentals and things like that, don't use playback. You should be able to hear it in your head. That's the most important thing. Now, for young writers, that's a challenge, of course, because they haven't got the relationship of writing something down, then hearing a band play it back yet. But overall, I think that's a great thing to a great part of the process, and a great thing for young composers and arrangers to understand, or even band leaders or producers, whatever they are. The concept is that's the quality of what you've got.
Well, the imagination, having the imagination to imagine what those instrument combinations are, and rather than just hitting the button and kind of hearing a pretty bad version of what they could be.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be that you've heard, and that's where like the research part comes into it, which is, I don't think about it that way, but just listening to tons of records and sort of, you know, I love just pulling out vinyl and just putting stuff on, and then I get all these different, and it'll be everything from Black Sabbath to like, you know, to Harry James, you know, and I love just sort of piecing it all together and finding things that sort of feel vibrant to me, and then that starts percolating all these different like ideas and interesting concepts. And that's the first thing. If someone commissions me to do a piece or an arrangement, the first thing I do is spend time in that imaginative state, and that is my favourite. Like, and I do love being in the studio with musicians and making records and being sort of like a crossover, like arranger, producer on a session, things like that. But to tell you the truth, once that's done, it's like I don't care if the album comes out. It's it sounds really weird, but I kind of lose. I really do. I lose interest. That's why I've got so much recorded music of my own that's sitting there unfinished or unmixed or anything like that. Not because I don't like it, not because I'm embarrassed to put it out. I lose the fire. Like my interest is in all the stuff that happens leading up to that. So I think that's a big part of when I think of music making. That's my music making, because I spend most of my time in that state, and then an extension of that is maybe at the piano, sort of just starting to sort of hear sounds and tones and textures together, harmonic textures together. You know, and in a singer-songwriter sense, maybe spending time on guitar as well. But, you know, in a compositional sense, you know, like the last thing I do is get to Sibelius. You know, the piece is kind of, it's got shape and it's got, you can feel, you know, I know what certain things are going to be, you know, like I'll have voice memos of me in the car, like singing things and going, and it's going to be this chord underneath, and, you know, and then this is going to come in. The alto flutes will come in and do that. The bass clarinet will come in 3 beats. So they sound like the ramblings of a madman, you know.
Well, they are.
Hear them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they don't have any context, you know, as far as like, I'm not sitting at a piano, I'm not sitting at a computer, like so much of it happens separate of that, which I really love. I'm really thankful that my brain is excited by that. There's nothing more depressing than that blank Sibelius screen, and you start going, now I'm going to compose. It's like, it doesn't work that way, you know, like,
First thing, I'll write the intro.
Yeah, and then you go, and then you like put a note in on the saxophone, go, and then play that. What is that? Yeah, cool. That's a good start. You know, like,
I'm a genius.
Not so much for people like, you know, not so much for us as people who've written for a number of years, but I think for a lot of young composers and young writers, that's kind of how they start. And I'm not saying it's an invalid process or it's not a good process, but I think a lot of them start there and they've missed 2 steps already. They've missed the research step, like, which is listening to records and finding out what excites them and what kind of things. Because we all steal a little bit, you know. Like, I mean, that's what we're all doing. We're all sort of taking things that we like. There's no doubt that I listen to all my early arrangements and I hear Lalo Schifrin in there, and there's no doubt with yours as well. You hear Bob Brookmeyer, and you know, things like that. Yeah, it's like we all have people, things we love that we bring into our own world, and so. I feel like, a lot of young composers and arrangers, they miss that step and they miss that imagination step. And I'm a big fan of, like, everything comes back to the piano. It's the most representative tool we have. It's architectural, it's visual, it's, you know, basically if you play a voicing on the piano, you know, and it sounds good, you know, or a color or anything like that, written for the right instrument, it will sound good. Like, it's the most representative tool we have. And so I'm a big fan also, separate of the imagination, but as far as the harmonic sort of relationship, it's like that. So that's why, I mean, I'm old fashioned that way. I just think you have to play piano. Everyone has to play piano, you know, to an extent.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, I'd say that's how I make music, you know, is in that state mostly. Yeah. And then it's a scramble to do the technical actual execution of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Then actually having to do it. Yeah. But that initial excitement is very well. It is the most exciting part. Then you just got to sit down and do it. It's like, got to do hard work. God,
another Tiger King.
Don't get me started on that. The third question is, what excites you musically right now?
Right now, and that's a really interesting question right now because of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, being sort of torn off a tour, you know, overseas and brought back, and same as all of us, having music vanish basically from our, not vanish from our lives, of course, but our professional music vanish from our lives. Like, you know, we all had the same thing of all our gigs basically just go up in smoke. And in the matter of about 3 or 4 days for me, it was like, and that's everything.
Yeah.
That's all my focus points for the next, however, like 6 months.
Yeah, 2020. Bye.
Yeah, and it was like this thing, and it's like it's a psychological thing as well because we're so used to in our life going, and we've got that coming up, and then there's that album launch, and then I know I'm going to play music with this, and then I'm arranging for this, you know, and they're really things not just musically, but also just as a lifestyle. And as a psychological thing, to have those pinpoints and those flag marks in your life is really important. And I found that really challenging. To tell you the truth, I felt really, some people straight away went into live streaming and and coming up with all sorts of interesting ideas. I kind of did the opposite. I sort of, you know, had this kind of I stepped away, you know, for the last sort of month. But, well, not for the whole month, but I definitely had a couple of weeks where I was like, I had no interest in playing my instrument. I had no interest in writing or doing anything. But it's funny, having that space and also the limitations we have not to play live now has got me all excited about some projects that have been percolating for years. You know, so what's exciting me in a broad sense at the moment, like without going, I can go into some specific, like, you know, music things, but in a broad sense is, you know, I mean, I guess it comes back to what we were just talking about for question number 2 is I'm feeling excited about ideas and projects and albums. And I feel like I'm gonna come out of the gates at the end of this with like, okay, booking studio time, let's do this, let's get this, and really sort of have a high output of like recorded music and projects and live projects that I want to put together. And it's interesting when you have the space to think about that, you get to make choices. I sometimes think as professional musicians, we end up just doing what we do because that's what we do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And also, you don't have the time to make choices or pick and choose. It's just like, yep, I'll do that, and then I'll do that. Yeah.
Not making. I feel like often we're not making genuine choices. Now, we obviously don't hate what we're doing most of the time, but, you know, often you just like, someone says, "Oh, can you do this?" and you're like, "Yep," because that's what I do. It's like, once it comes back to the first question, it comes back to identity. That's who I am. I'm an arranger. So when someone asks me to arrange, I say yes and do it. And
it's amazing when you've got a full diary and you can fit it in, you'll do it. But now the diary's empty. Now the diary's like a clean slate. Yeah.
No, it's a really interesting feeling. It's not maybe one I've had very often. I've had times when I've had maybe a quiet 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then of course I've had times when I'll road trip for a month overseas. But that's a different kind of stimulus as well, like that gets me excited about music. Whereas to actually be at home and not have anything sort of in the immediate future has changed my thought process about how I sort of interact with music and interact with the idea of projects. But in some ways, it feels like it's been a really beautiful time because it's been a bit of a reset for me to get excited about actually making genuine choices about what I want to do next, and not just like, well, I'll do that because that's what I already do. So that's exciting for me. And then on a more musical level, I'm just more and more over the last, you know, sort of 5-6 years, I've been writing more string music, like music for strings and orchestral instruments. And I'm really, really excited to do more of that. I've got a new project I was sort of halfway through when all this sort of happened, called Dark Heart, which is me and Danny Ferrugia, who's a great drummer from Melbourne, percussionist, and a guy named Ben Edgar, who's a really beautiful guitarist. So it's just drums, guitar, and then a string quintet.
Nice.
So two violins, viola, cello, and double bass. And it's Ben Hanlon, who's really amazing playing double bass, and he's a really unique one because he's a beautiful bowing classical player, but also has played with rhythm sections and plays great jazz. So it's a really interesting sort of like dark, slow folk sound, really washed out kind of rhythm section sounds, really spacious, but then heaps of room for the strings to kind of be kind of orchestral and more sort of, I guess, 20th century, but in the context of these sort of dark folk songs.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. So the string thing is really like, that's become my favorite. Funny as a trumpet player, like, you know, but it's very rare that I write for big band anymore unless it's a commission or something like that. It's very rare that I feel excited to write for my own instrument. Like I said, the trumpet isn't my connector anymore.
Right.
As in, yeah, so I feel like, and it's funny, I feel like I'm a better string composer or orchestral sort of, or semi-orchestral, however you want to call it, but I'm better at writing for those instruments than I am at writing for big band. I never was.
Right. Well, look forward to hearing this project.
Yeah, I can't wait to get it out.
Yeah.
If I ever do, I'll probably get bored and try something else.
Yeah. Well,
cancel the CD launch. Cancel the album launch the day before.
Nah. Yeah. No, you got to stay committed. You got to stay committed to this one.
Yeah, I know. I will. No, I think that's what I mean. I think this time and this space and this empty diary has actually made me like, what are the genuine things I want to do that I will follow through on and feel good about, and actually have the psychological space to process the right way and feel like I'm doing them justice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for agreeing to talk and answer these questions. If you send me some links to your music that's out there, and I'll put them. What do they say down below or something?
I don't know. I barely figured out how to get the Zoom meeting going. So yeah, I'm not the person to ask.
You nailed it.